And it's because of this that if you ask them what is the opposite of water, they will tell you what? Fire. Right? Water is the opposite of fire. See, because in this being's consciousness, they're more wired to look at the elements and actually see which elements are really destructive for each other to then determine what is their opposites. That is kind of incorrect. Completely. An advanced being is going to basically look at the elements that actually complement each other, because even though they complement each other, they're still opposites. And in this case, it's water and earth.
The following clip is exclusive content from the InnerVersity. Access over 300 videos and 26 courses with advanced metaphysics on demand. Jump in live chats with Savan and the rest of the tribe. New materials are available monthly, along with guides and regiments. Subscribe today and save $25 off your first month membership. Links are in the descriptions. Subscribe to Secret Energy TV or this channel for future show notifications.
It is now an experiment because since I've cracked the entire code around the planet, I'm very interested to move on and see what else is going on in the cosmos and how I can put the body back together again, like literally rebuild the entire suprahuman consciousness based on the knowledge that was already given about how it's put together and how it's formulated. So I want to talk to you very briefly, just and also very candidly, very clearly. I want to give you a very, very clear example of something. So that way, when I start talking about things that may seem far-fetched to you, you can still remember what I said in the beginning. And this is about, imagine we are in, I don't know, the Stone Age, right? Like we have questions about all these times, right? We don't even know, was there a caveman? Some say no, right? But let's just imagine there's a caveman, we're in the Stone Age. In this time, every single thing that is needed to build even the technologies and the computers that are around us now was already present then. It's just that nobody knew how to put it together. Nobody knew how to get it out of the ground, form it and fashion it, connect it, all of that to make it what it is now. So back then, if you were explaining to somebody about this, like this future and how we could do these kind of things, I mean, you already know what it is. Nobody will believe you. They can't see it. It's not there. It's not possible. So now let's fast forward into this time that we're in right now and look back at that time and be like, see, we were right and everybody else was wrong. It happens. You can be right and everybody else is wrong. But I'm asking you this evening to take one more jump through time to what some would call the future, and look back at right now and realize that when I explain some of the things that we are going to do and we are already doing in the future, the reaction could be just like the Stone Age person, like, you kidding me? No way, because in this space and time, people haven't figured out how to put it together yet. And that putting it together has a lot to do with symbols. It has a lot to do with very powerful things, even things that may have a tendency to be put in the reality as scary. So that basically there would be somewhat of a warning about these components, or what you would say are like, there's a specific word for Easter egg. This is the word we use. An Easter egg. Something that can happen in the reality that you don't really know how it happened, but it happened. But then later on in the future, someone else can pull all that, pull that apart and be like, okay, the etheric energy was very high because you were standing on top of a ley line. You crossed both your hemispheres of the brain in true intention that you wanted to go forward with it. you were standing on a cross or whatever. You see what I mean? So real fundamentals to what is it exactly that makes something work. Because other than that, it just becomes like a miracle for some people, and then others don't even really understand how it actually happened or how it works. So I just want you to be aware of this stages of unlocking wisdom. And there have been times where there was no way to convince anybody about the times even that we're living in now. And so too in the future, it would be very difficult to convince the people in this present time of the technologies that exist in the future unless you catch on to the whole thing and catch on to what's going on, and that there's really no time, there's really no past, present, and future. What there really is your ability to understand how to tap in and what you're actually tapping into. So there's a level of self-awareness that needs to happen. And this is, of course, why everything that is around building the consciousness, building energy, and building strength is generally around self-awareness and knowing yourself and knowing how to even manipulate, if you may, your own consciousness. Okay? But sometimes you need the core fundamentals of what you're even manipulating your consciousness into. Right? Because somebody say, hey, be positive. Why am I being positive? I may grinch you and just be like, why? I may why you to death and roll wheels in your mind in order to make sure that you can fully explain why we should go on this journey together. Right? So I do that to myself. I say, why? Why do you need this? Why do you want this? Why is this important? So I'm definitely not starting off with the extra number theory right now. Actually, you know what? It's there right there. So I am going to start off with the extra number theory. Okay, so wow. I thought we would be going like this, but it looks like it's going to be Mount Everest right away. Okay. Now, I don't want to turn your codes and your systems and your awareness around already to what you understand, because there's levels to this. But I want you to realize that there's something odd going on with the numbers themselves and symbolisms and how symbols connect to numbers. And what this leads to ultimately is that there's another system. And what consciousness is basically functioning on a certain system or certain algorithm or coding. Let me get something real quick. I just want to pull up an image here. Okay. I just want to introduce something that I've been seeing a lot for years, and I didn't say anything about it personally because I didn't want to really confuse anybody. And I also struggle with how to really explain it, and I call it the extra number theory. And what this is about is if you looked at this design and I asked you to tell me how many sides is this, or points or whatever, by a show of hands, how many people would say 8? Okay. How many people would not say 8 because you know that 8 wouldn't be right, and I'm not gonna. Now I'm talking. Who's thinking it? You see? This is what I'm saying. I'm not the only one playing around in the future. Okay, so let's just say that the standard answer would be 8, okay? However, in occultism, this is 9. Does anybody know why? You want to type in there? All right, I think Rasul is saying it. The center, exactly. The center needs to be counted. But do you see how that could just throw everything off? Like even a pentagram, if that's really 6 instead of 5, if a hexagon is really 7 instead of 6, that could just it could be like a whole cabinet of dominoes falling on occult theory, because you would have already designated, let's say in this case, the number 8 to the planet Saturn, right? And, so you may have already designated all of the whole system and decoded it that way. And this is why I've come to realize that because there's technically at least 2 systems. When I only say there's 2 systems, it's because of maxims and principles that makes it only 2 systems. And I'm going to explain those maxims and principles here in a moment. But for all intensive purposes, it's like this world would basically be a shadow. This other world that wasn't exactly the same way as the original would be akin to what we see as our shadow. Okay? And I'm just going to go right into this. So how did this all start? I'm going to start about how all this started. How did it start turning infinite wheels literally in my mind? So I'm looking at something the other day, and I'm trying to put abbreviation for December, okay? But in Spanish. And I know that the Spanish abbreviations are different. So I go to check the internet, and sure enough, it's like, yeah, that's not the abbreviation for December in Spanish. This is the abbreviation for December in Spanish. And I had to giggle for a moment. And I said, that's odd. Why would the Latins, or on the Latin Vulgate, why would they actually make December the name of the male phallic symbol, right? So I'm just going through that slow process in my mind, or what you would say is the guttural name of the male phallic symbol. And right away, all intelligence system is like, oh, because December is the month of the Saturnalia. And Saturnalia is, of course, the fertility god. And in this way, the Saturnalia in itself is a representation of a phallus symbol, or the male genitalia. And we know that, like the people in all the occultism and all this, they already understand that there's this symbolism around Saturn. And Saturn is also known to be a cedar. Okay, so I want to just put these words in here, because what I'm going to be explaining, you don't need to really believe somebody. It's actually in the words, right? So I find out basically that this word DC actually is somehow leading to this being Saturn, right? And I'm going to show you how this works. So now we also know in most of the Christmas lore, Saturn is Santa Claus, right? And then the Christmas has the Xmas, right? And when you look up, okay, so this is where things start getting weird. Dec traditionally means 10, okay? However, this word and its origins comes from the Greek word that means 12, okay? And this is why this happens on the 12th month of the year, okay? So right away, you see what I'm talking about number systems, that some of these numbers are not even one number off. They're like two numbers off, because of course, and this is just basic 101 for us as far as the decoders. We know Nov, we know Sept, right? We know Oct, right? So Nov means 9, Sept means 7, Oct means 8, okay? However, these, of course, are our 11th, our 9th. So the months are like off 2 days. Okay, so we already understand this. This is basic and rudimentary stuff from our level of awareness at this stage. But what's most important to see here is that there is a code that once you know the key to this code, it actually allows you to understand everything that's going on in the world, how the world is put together, this specific world that we're in, and the whole story also around how this one even started. So let me begin also with just this awareness of these two powers, or these two principles. Since we've identified that DEC, or Dec, actually refers to a rock or a hard place or land, we can then see that technically then, in this respect, there's only two forces. There is land, and then there is ocean. Okay? Listen to what I'm saying. That there's land, because land is solid. Is even when there's an earthquake, land is not supposed to move. It's like mass or matter. While the water is constantly moving, right? And that's exactly the whole energy and everything around water is that it's not stable. But the land is stable. So what you're in front of is the two most powerful occult principles on the planet: earth and water. And with earth and water, you can see that there is a line, which we call the shore, that really is like the boundary points between these two elements. So if you ever are not sure, or the shore, it's because you're kind of in the middle anyway. You're in that play area. And this play area is actually measured. It exists from, unless the water is breaking its banks, it exists from when it's on low tide, the lowest point that the water reaches. That is the beginning of the next kingdom. So the lowest point that the water reaches is the beginning, or at low tide, is the beginning of the next kingdom. While in high tide, when the high tide comes all the way through, all the way to when the high tide pushes all the way the furthest out, the distance between that space and where it pushed furthest out is what we would call this is like what you would say is the 0 point, the gap, the gray area. Okay? So you're talking about two hardcore principles. This is also why it starts to be explained as masculine and feminine. But once we start doing that, we're degrading it, because what we're doing is we're going into binary coding. Once you try to attach a 0 or a 1, a good or an evil, to anything that you're trying to decipher, you're immediately bringing it into the cipher. You see that word? Decipher. Okay? So you're immediately, meaning that even the cipher part of decipher, because you can have a lot of DE words, but the DEC being present in decipher and beginning the word decipher lets you know it's all related to this energy and this power. Now I'm going to make this all very clear, but I want you to understand that there's two different kind of beings here in the planet based on how they've configured their energy. One is consistently looking for the opposing force or the negative, the good and the bad. And it's because of this that if you ask them what is the opposite of water, they will tell you what? Fire. Right? Water is the opposite of fire. See, because in this being's consciousness, they're more wired to look at the elements and actually see which elements are really destructive for each other to then determine what is their opposites. But that is kind of incorrect. Completely. An advanced being is going to basically look at the elements that actually complement each other, because even though they complement each other, they're still opposites. And in this case, it's water and earth. So in its most core principles, when you mix water and earth together, you get clay. And this is why right away in most spiritual systems, the beginning of the creation of humanity started with clay or clots or congealed blood, as they called it. But it's a simple stage of awareness that the waters are commingling with the solid and creating life forms. So watch how in these two worlds, though, the most interesting thing is like, inside of the water world, there are fleshly animals. So technically, the flesh on the animal is the land. So they got whales, dolphins, and stuff, and they're in the water. And also, we have human beings on the planet and animals on the planet that are full of water. So in this way, we have two opposing forces, earth and water, actually being used in a synergistic way, or as a singularity, in order to actually produce life. So that means that the other two components then, which in this case would be air and fire, would also be two components that can empower each other. And sure enough, When you add a good balance of air and a good balance of fire, have you ever seen how powerful a fire gets when wind is blowing on it? So do you see the difference in this way, in this mode of consciousness? It's looking at opposing elements to find the ones that, when working together, create even more, rather than looking at elements to see which ones destroy each other. You get it? Because all of the spiritual systems that we're looking at, even as they testify in their wisdom coming from Solomon, was designed just like that. It's an adversarial network. It's a network that's basically designed to self-destruct by eating its own self. So let's just keep going a little bit deeper. And then also, now that we realize that, we've come to understand already two bigger principles. One, that numbers float. It's a 5 moving into a 6. It's a 6 moving into a 7. And what makes that float are core symbols like geometry. Core things become the bridges for things to get into their next stage. We've also learned now that there is this margin point, the gray area, this floating point. And the reason why that is important to remember is because sometimes you would think you see things going on that would trigger polarity systems that would put those situations in check, but not if it's in the gray area. What I mean by gray area is like a place where the laws don't act either as fast or sometimes even at all, because it's like the place has been set aside or sealed off or even created. And let me break this down a little bit more on what I'm referring to. So it seems to me very clearly that the entire cosmos is on a higher divine order for sure. That there are celestial bodies that emit lights and all types of stuff that actually govern the balance between the entire universe. And technically, when you really understand that, stuff that we be seeing on Earth doesn't really fit into the picture. It seems almost like it's behind in certain ways. And I started thinking about this, and what I came to in the level of awareness is, first of all, when you look at the body, because the body is a map to this specific design, the body is sealed off too. The body is kind of designed in a way, there's only a few opening points, but you don't, the body is hermetically sealed. That's why when you get a cut, you need to close the cut because it'll get infected and all this kind of stuff. So your body is sealed because it'll get infected. But because it's sealed, that means that it's closed off from something. So if you can imagine that, since the Earth, if you may, or the planet, actually, when you want to include the whole thing, is the same design as the body, that means that it's sealed off too. But what is it sealed off from? And what I'm explaining to you is that it's sealed off from the influence, the real-time influence of the cosmos, and what the cosmos will be doing with every single organism that was actually dialed directly into it. Okay. But as we know, when we're talking about the cosmos now, what we're actually talking about more of is like a center point, an allspark. And that the further you get away from it, the stranger things get, because the light itself is diminishing. So thus the material that is being formed takes on even grotesque shapes, and it almost bears no witness to the original emanation. But as you get closer and closer to the original emanation, it's like all of this awareness and all this power just starts to begin to center around you.